it takes a village to make good art, and there were a ton of people that worked on that project from top to bottom to really flesh everything out to make it sound the way that it does. But you know, it's a blessing just being able to see the journey that that project has been on and see just the reception to it across the world has been really cool. Couldn't have asked for an easier set of clients to work with. The boys are so sweet. Like they knew what they wanted to do, had a plan for it, and we were just helping them execute. I think some of my favorite things, especially as I had worked at Shangri-La Studios for a couple of years at that point, one of the things that they did to make the space their own was they covered all of the walls with paper so that they could go through and they could write all of their notes, they could write all the lyrics on the walls, they could draw, and as they were working on the project, you just saw that kind of expanse continue to grow. And the whole studio was just full of lots of different drawings and anecdotes and stories and like lyrics, ideas all over the place. It was a very free-flowing session. And I thought that was a really unique way of keeping everything together as it was so free-flowing. I have a big focus when I'm engineering a client on the space, on the energy that's going on in the room, and not necessarily involving myself in creative decisions, especially if I am in the engineer chair versus production or writing or other roles, but keeping an eye out on who is doing those things in those moments and making sure that the space caters to the energy that they're trying to create. It's definitely allowed me to put the energy that I would have put into lining stuff up into other parts of the process. Like I'm a big fan of manually RXing every single lead, like getting clicks out, getting things super clean, and having VocAlign to be able to speed up and keep the process of stacking backgrounds to that lead once it's clean, efficient, has been fantastic. It's been super helpful in the studio, especially when I'm working as a producer and I'm also engineering and mixing the project, because then there's a lot of different focuses going on. It really helps consolidate the workflow and it brings consistency at the end. VocAlign, and the way that I've used it, is an audio suite plugin, which allows you to load in your lead vocal, and then you load in a background vocal, or sometimes you'll have different backgrounds against each other. And it just looks at the difference in transients and works to line those transients back up so that things will sound tighter. And it's nice because it has a lot of granularity, especially in VocAlign 5, where you can adjust how tight it is, how much of a delay there is between different stuff, and how accepting it is of differences on there. I've also noticed moving from 4 to 5, it's really nice at being able to determine what is actually being synced with another line and what is something independent. So if an artist has 5 stacks and the last stack is a falsetto one that's a little bit different at the end, VocAlign is good at being able to tell, okay, we don't need to retime that. That part is its own unique thing, but we need to retime the beginning of the phrase to match with everything else. For the R&B production that I do, especially for my home studio, it's essential. Like being able to go through and quickly get those things stacked up in order to just meet the timelines that artists want to work on, and be able to be present with them working on stuff creatively and not just constantly doing minute edits throughout the whole process. It's definitely become pretty essential, especially as I've been building out a client list, to be able to quickly process things, just be able to use the tool. Last night in this session, we were talking about Mariah Carey, and I've listened to a little bit of Mariah Carey, but I'm not super deep in her music. But the artist that I was working with was super familiar, and she was talking about, we were comparing her old music to a record that she dropped in 2018, and just the difference in the vocal tonality, the difference in how much tune was applied to it, the difference in how stacks were approached in that song versus if she had recorded that song 20 years previously. It definitely has a big impact. Like, I'm sure that if you go back to when VocAlign started, things started to get a lot tighter out of nowhere. I would say as you're building out your tool chest as an engineer, as a producer, it's less important to have a million different things than it is to know what the things you have do. So like having a tool like VocAlign to be able to line things up, having a tool like RX to be able to clean things up, you know, those surgical tools become life and death when it comes down to actually getting things locked in, and knowing how to use those tools rather than just continuing to get more and more tools. You know, I would rather have 5 really solid plugins on my computer and know how to use those to an absolute T than have every plugin in the world, but then be completely overwhelmed by the choice of trying to figure out how to approach it. That was a very unexpected text on a Friday morning. I definitely suspected that the project would chart and would get some sort of nomination, but the amount of recognition that it received was definitely really surprising. I was surprised to see, and I was incredibly thankful to everybody on the team for the fact that they offered that recognition to the engineers and to the producers that have worked on the project, because not every artist does that, honestly. Like, it shows a lot, like how caring the boys were to take the time to recognize all of us alongside what they did on these projects. And like, yeah, I found out via a text from my friend Chloe, who is now Phoebe's assistant, who was just working at Shangri-La, kind of in the same way that I was at the time when we met the band and started working with them. So it was definitely a full circle moment getting a text from her. It's like, by the way, you guys got nominated too. I was like, wow, that's really sick. I've got 2 EPs coming out with different artists that I've produced over the next couple months, as well as a handful of singles that I've mixed. So it'll definitely be a busy rollout period over the next few months of different types of content. Right now, I'm predominantly working out of my home studio in Koreatown. We call it Maplewood Studios. Just doing a lot of production and mixing work from here, but also bouncing around, you know, open to any opportunities that come up. It's been a little while since I've been at Shangri-La, but still, you know, have lots of love for those guys. I actually have been talking to them just recently, just about some unrelated stuff. I have a page on engineers.com. If anybody is looking for mixing and mastering services, or anybody LA based, I would love to continue to meet new artists for production work, for recording. You know, I love diving in on the ground floor of the creative process with people and helping bring things to life. So if there's people out there that are looking for that, you know, would love to be able to help out on that stuff.